Well, you made it. Another absolute train wreck of a year comes to a close, and you are on the other side and worse for it. But in honor of such an absolutely outstanding year in heavy metal, let us make a toast. Cheers. Let's start off with some honorable mentions, shall we? I'll buzz through these because I have a lot of albums that I really liked but didn't quite match the level of how much I liked the top five. Five was an arbitrary number. Those were the 5 albums that I listened to the most, and it wasn't particularly close. So here's everything else that I thought was really good. Rex Mortem by Burn and Effigy, Dream Killer by Sumerlands, Chants from Purgatory by Graceless, The God Machine by Blind Guardian, Let There Be Witchery by Midnight, Eradication by Sisters of Suffocation, Mass Destroyer by Demonical, Beyond the Macabre by Paganizer, Tragic Magic by Spell, Pathos by Conjurer, False Light by White Ward, Black Braid 1 by Black Braid, Damnum by Elysian, I don't know how to pronounce their band name, but whatever. Empyrean by Fallujah, and Zealand Ardor's self-title. A lot of good music came out this year, man. Without further ado, let's get into the top 5. These are the records that I loved the most this year. Maybe not particularly the best, but the ones that I just invested the most in. I tried to be pretty objective about what I was actually listening to the most. Let's get into it. At number 5, we have Assassins by Celeste. This is a weird band. This is some avant-garde post-black metal out of France. I think the avant-garde black metal part is maybe not wide enough to really capture their scope. They bring so much more to the table than that. It's really hard to kind of put them into a specific genre categorization because they have some hardcore influence, they have some death metal influence mixed in. Throughout their discography, it's been predominantly this kind of very frantic hardcore style vocal delivery, and that almost paces itself a little bit more and really focuses more on the emotion of everything. And I think that that was one of the real strengths of this album compared to some of their other works. The album art as well is pretty par for the course for them. It helps establish kind of the mood of the album right away, which is what you want the album art to do. So it does its job very well. In terms of the mood and the themes of this album, it's dark, it's pummeling, but there is some kind of brightness behind a lot of the very heavy and upfront riffs. And I think a really good example of that is in track 2, which is Déteste You Blue Palace. Hold on.
De tes yeux perles.
What the fuck? I missed a word in there.
De tes yeux bleu perles.
Déteste You Blue Palace. I think that's as good as it's gonna get. Translates roughly to of your pearly blue eyes. Opening riff of this song is just devastating, but kind of tucked away behind it is this really bright kind of strumming, and it just creates this immediate conflict between the two that I think really helps set the tone for the song. It's just a really interesting, very artsy album. But I think the biggest selling point for this album for me was just the production of it was just flawless. And even if you're not into black metal, it doesn't really sound like black metal, but it has the atmospheric kind of elements of it that I really like. And yeah, just a weird fucking album, but just sounds so good. All right, now let's hop into track number 4, or not track number 4, album number 4 on my list. We have Oh What the Future Holds by Fit for an Autopsy. This is one of my most favorite deathcore bands, if not my most favorite deathcore band. And I think a lot of people comparing some of the songs on this album to Gojira is maybe not a coincidence, but hey, I'm not going to complain because This album is just an absolute banger, start to finish. They've done such a good job of kind of carving out their own niche in the whole scene by kind of going in the opposite direction of where a lot of bands are going these days. You look at a band like Lorna Shore and all the success that they're having, and well deserved, but there's a lot of bands trying to copy that system, that style of just having this vocal delivery that is so, predicated on contrasting the high highs and the low lows and creating all these funky sounds. And Fit for an Autopsy don't need any of those gimmicks, I will say hesitantly, because I know Will Ramos, his vocal style is not a gimmick, but trying to emulate that because of its success would be gimmicky, and bands trying to do that is a gimmick. Fit for an Autopsy just kind of hang out in their lane and they execute with absolute flawless precision. Ever since Absolute Hope, Absolute Hell, you've just seen this progression, keeping in this lane of this very devastating style of deathcore that's not so guttural that it's incomprehensible. It has passion and emotion and meaning behind it, and it just makes you connect more with the music, and especially when it's such a poignant message that is being delivered, it just makes it that much more memorable and something that just gives you something to really be angry about that the listener can connect to and isn't, so abstract that you just you think it's cool and edgy, but whatever. This is music that really gets you fired up. Man, they just continue to separate themselves in their composition as well. You get songs that have a lot more progressive elements thrown in without it kind of faffing about and getting too self-indulgent with it. You have real, just old school classic headbangers like Savages, but then you can contrast that with some more profound and explorative compositions like Far From Heaven and Two Towers. I think it does everything that the Sea of Tragic Beasts did well and does it better. In a subgenre that is so rapidly being pushed in the direction of the Lorna Shores and the Brand of Sacrifices, you see a band like Fit for an Autopsy just sticking to their guns, and you can't help but respect it. I really applaud them for doing that and just saying, hey, this is what we're about, this is the kind of music that we make, and making it sound so damn good. All right. Number 3 on the list. This one is a little self-indulgent. This is some progressive metal, as artsy as it gets. This is The Signal Heard Throughout Space by Pathos. If you are a fan of the Between the Buried and Me's and the Hakens of the world, then you are going to love this. This is the 3rd studio album from Pathos, which is a band that I did not know about until this release. And I think it just leaves those first 2 albums in the dust after going back and listening to them. It really tells the story very well, which is what kind of this progressive concept album style music is supposed to do. I think a lot of artists can get lost in trying to tell this story that doesn't really track, doesn't really follow very well. It really feels like you're kind of watching a play. It's very space opera, and that's kind of the concept of the album. One of my friends, when looking at the album art, said it was Stranger Things meets Star Wars, and that's pretty on the nose. Thematically, that's kind of what it's about. It's about this spaceship captain who's searching for the signal heard throughout space, and it sounds really good too. They all just have moments on different songs where either the bass is the star of the show and it kind of leads the intro and everything piles on top, or the guitar comes out with a riff to start the song and everybody piles onto that, and everybody just gets their moment. The vocalist, Louis Thierry, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, he just indulges in this kind of musical style singing in a lot of tracks, and I think it just sounds really cool over a lot of the instrumentals in this album. The fact that they kept it interesting throughout was kudos to them. I'm not a huge fan of this kind of progressive metal style, and I think a lot of the other bands that I've mentioned that I really enjoyed would kind of point to that. And I think that just goes to show how well executed this album was and how much I think people should go check it out. The top two was really tough for me. This one is so deserving of the #1 spot. It is Nether Heaven by Revocation. Just the way Revocation has evolved over time has been such a delight to take part in. You see this band that starts off as this kind of thrashy death metal band and evolves so much over time into just a juggernaut of the technical death metal subgenre. And now they've taken this formula that worked so well and really stripped a lot of it off and then put on a new coat of paint of just brutal death metal. And it just works so well for them. You just get so many more devastating riffs, and the tuning of the guitars is just so much more death metal focused, and it really works with some of the lyrical themes. The album art is absolutely sick as hell, very Beksinski-esque. You get this really cool painting of, the gates of hell themselves, which sets the tone for the album, which is all about going through the different layers of hell. Along the way, it kind of masks a lot of these lyrical themes of modern problems in our society, go figure, especially in some of the tracks. Like Nihilistic Violence is just this aggressive tirade against toxicity of news outlets and social media, and that really kind of feeds into the next track, Strange and Eternal, where it uses this allegory to The King in Yellow, which is a book about how reading this play, The King in Yellow, drives someone mad. And I think that's a really kind of obvious metaphor for when somebody kind of loses themselves to this online identity. David Davidson is, as always, a master on the guitar. His vocal performance is the best, I think, of his career. The lyrics that were written, I believe, by him as well are very good, as I've said before. But the whole album comes to a close with vocal appearances from the late Trevor Strnad of the Black Dahlia Murder, as well as Corpse Grinder of Cannibal Corpse. And it kind of embodies this confrontation with the devil himself, and just is a great way to finish out this very evil, vile tech death album. And now, it's time. The #1 album for me this year, I don't think that there's ever been an album that has lived up to the name quite like this. It is All That Was Promised by Hath. They have just completely outdone themselves. The care and attention to detail in the production of this thing is insane. The drummer has some videos on YouTube that are actually really cool and go into the production that he did for a lot of it. And they had like more than 10 guitars used on this record to get different sounds. It's just impressive, man, and it pulls from so many different influences from, melodic death metal, technical death metal, progressive metal, blackened death metal, atmospheric black metal, like the list goes on. And you just throw everything together, and pretty impressive how it doesn't feel too busy. It doesn't feel like none of the elements work together. It's just such a good blend of everything together. It's modern death metal done right. Also, by the way, their drummer, AJ Viana, absolutely fucking rips. Both of the guitarists are really talented. Also, one of the guitarists is also the singer, Frank Albanese, just kills it. This album has so many memorable, like, earworm type sections that, because of the way that the vocals are delivered and the way that they are layered together and harmonized, it's so satisfying to listen to. The record begins with The Million Violations, which really sets the tone well for the album. It's not too fast or too hectic, but it does deliver a lot of the elements that you are going to see on the rest of the album, and creates this wall of sound without ever feeling claustrophobic or too smothering. Right after that, you go into Kenosis, which has this really interesting clean vocal section that is just layered to the brim with different vocal harmonies. The way that they kind of execute that too is really tasteful, I think, because it doesn't, pop up on very many songs. I can think of maybe 2 or 3 instances across the whole album where they do something like that, and it goes no more than one cycle of this kind of bridge or chorus or whatever it would be in that instance. And so it doesn't get overused, and it makes it that much more special every time and just gives so much re-listenability to every song. I think every song on this album is great, but especially the 2 middle tracks, Decollation and Death Complex. You get probably the most passionate delivery of any vocal line on Decollation, and Death Complex takes you on just an absolute roller coaster of emotions, from these really bright highs and then really deep down into this kind of deathcore-esque, really chuggy section. And it wraps up with, I think, my favorite solo on the whole album, if I had to pick one. That might be my favorite guitar solo, actually, from Hath in general. I'm just thinking about it now. Yeah, the album then wraps up a bit slower, and there's so much stimulus on this album that you kind of need that rest period at the end of Name Them Yet Build No Monument, where you kind of just take it all in and get ready to put the album on repeat, because there's no way you're going to listen to this thing once. There's just so much going on. It's like a good movie where every time you listen through it, or every time you watch a really good movie, there's just more kind of foreshadowing that reveals the ending. And it's the same here. You just get so many aspects that you missed on the first listen or first 2 listens. I still find myself coming back to Elements and hearing things that I haven't heard before, and that's really hard to do with how much I listen to this band. If you don't believe me, I will put up the stats on just how much I listen to this record to back up my point of, man, it's just great. Really exciting to see, where they're headed from here, because their last record in 2019 of Rotten Ruin was also excellent. Everything that this band has put out is great. This album is their magnum opus as of yet, but hopefully they can continue on this track. So now let's shift over to the best EP of the year, which is probably to nobody's surprise, Blue Nothing by Worm. That shit rips. If you liked Foreverglade, you're gonna love this. The best single I'd put out to Iron Shackles by Lucifer. Best heavy metal song of the year in my opinion, and probably one of the most disappointing albums of the year, because that track was so good and that album was so much of a letdown. I realized after filming this that I forgot to film an outro, so here it is. The beauty of music is that it is subjective. At the end of the day, everybody's going to have their own tastes and their own preferences, and I think that's what makes metal so great. At the end of the day, it's really just so diverse that everybody can find something that they attach to, and everybody can have this different catalog of music that they really enjoy. So for that reason, I would like to reach out to all of you guys who made it this far into the video. Please leave any albums that I may have missed in the comments below, so that myself or anybody else watching can go and check out those bands and maybe add to their personal catalog of favorite bands. There's a good chance that maybe I just missed it or haven't listened to it, so please feel free to share. I know you wouldn't want to keep all these good bands from me or from the rest of the people that are going to be watching. Also, if you enjoyed the video and want to listen to me spew more of my pretentious opinions, please leave a like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it, and it would motivate me to continue to improve the quality of these videos. Happy holidays, y'all. Stay safe. Love each other. I'll see you later.